Hi there, Seraph here, once again making the announcements for my master. I hope you enjoy, so please remember to subscribe, and if you feel up to it, leave a like, or even comment if you so desire. Anyway, you can also follow me on Twitter at Outlaw Realms. Anyway, on with the chapter. CyberTech Worlds Clash by Outlaw Realms, a Harry Potter DC and Marvel crossover. Chapter 12. Terror's Terror. Luna Lovegood's head pounded less than she would have thought. In fact, she felt positively lightheaded and relaxed. She could only hope that Hermione had gotten her warning so they could prepare for an attempt at kidnapping the Prime Minister from Dumbledore and his loon. And they thought Luna was the loony one. Dumbledore really shouldn't be so foolish as to commit acts of war based on one's own belief that they were stronger without all the facts, or giving a damn about any of those facts when he had them, obviously pointing out that they were in way over their heads. She internally sighed at the stupidity of it all, and wondered whether Dumbledore even bothered queuing in the common sense line before he was born. It took Luna a few moments to crack open her eyes, and she had to blink several times in surprise as she was floating in some kind of transparent green fluid that kind of tasted like her girl juices. Well, she would rather not explain to herself, and certainly not to anyone else, how she knew what that taste was like. She was strapped down to something soft and naked with some wires and tubes coming from her skin, though they didn't hurt in the least. However, Luna knew she was breathing in the liquid, which felt gooey, but she still had what seemed to be a tube down her throat assisting her breathing along with something over her mouth and nose that did nothing to stop the goo, but seemed to hold the tube in place. Luna was wondering whether this was some kind of muggle healing tank as she felt quite good and well rested, but she may have been in it for a while. Though, she hoped it hadn't been too long as Dumbledore had most likely taken Sirius, Remus and the Weasley twins prisoner for helping her escape, and they may need rescuing. She almost startled as she saw the beaming face of a fully clothed Amanda. Avalon standing outside the glass window looking in on her with concern. "Whoa girl, you really scared us," she spoke, and Luna realized she could hear her through built-in speakers. "Tinted," Amanda said as she tapped the glass. "I mean one way. You can see out, but I can't see in." So, she gestured a holographic screen next to her that only showed Luna from her shoulders up. "Seraph says that she's not permitted to show visitors more than that, but I'm here to spring you anyway, so totally going to look." She laughed while Luna couldn't help but smile. "Anyway," Amy continued brightly with a cheeky smirk on her lips. "You've been in there for the max 2 days already. Dr. McGinnis says you'll be coming out in a few, so as I said, I came to spring you. We would have kept you on a bed, but we needed the full details of what happened, okay?" Luna could just manage a nod. "Good, don't worry," Amy said gently. "You're getting the best medical attention in the world. Though, I have some slightly bad news." Luna just raised a curious eyebrow to tell her to continue. "You're going to need continued therapy for a while, as one of the curses did some damage to your spine that we couldn't heal straight out, so it'll take a while. It would have healed better if you hadn't dragged yourself here after getting hurt, or we could rely on a healer. We might have faster results, but it would have been the same anyway." Luna just gave a nod of understanding as the pod started moving lower and lying back as the liquid started draining out of it. She waited, and as the fluid fully left her except the taste, smell and gooey feel, the glass hatch opened up to reveal 2 twin girls, nurses perhaps, and they carefully began taking all of the wires off her naked body while Amanda brought over a dressing gown while smirking as she did keep to her promise as her eyes wandered. But Luna only smiled and rolled her blue eyes at her friend's crazy antics. They helped her into the robe before the 3 of them helped her onto a trolley bed as she could barely move her legs. "How are you feeling, Miss Lovegood?" asked a male's soft voice suddenly as a brown-haired man with blonde highlights entered the room and strolled up to her bed. "I am feeling quite well, considering." "Thank you very much, doctor," she answered with a quirky voice. He offered up a warm smile before nodding to the nurses. "You may take her to her room, and the duty nurse is to be informed of her whereabouts if she leaves." "Okay," Mandy moaned. "But we were only going to have a girls' night out downstairs in the restaurant, and we were certain Miss Luna would have liked it, right Miss Amanda?" "Of course, can't we?" Amanda complained. "It is Luna's birthday in 12 days, she can't be cooped up until we can use her birthday to guilt you into letting her out." He sighed while rolling his eyes. "As long as you don't leave the building and Luna doesn't consume any alcohol, I'm fine with it, understand?" "Yes sir," The three declared with mock salutes as they led the confused girl away. Well, pushed her along on her bed to her private room where they could clean her up in the shower, dress her, and set up her wheelchair. Meanwhile, on Downing Street, the British Prime Minister had only just returned to number 10 with his 2 CyberTech bodyguards plus his own Secret Service agents. They were reluctant to let in 2 outsiders, but it got sorted as he would not budge on the matter, and rightfully so with these magic maniacs after him. He didn't just have one group of nutbars after him but now he had 2. According to Harry, these new nutbars were delusional purists that had recently started showing off their true colors, and from the CCTV footage he would have to agree. The blasted old man, Albus Dumbledore, had even resorted to attacking people who didn't agree with him. He had seen the medical report of the poor young woman's condition, and she got into that state to bring them a message that Dumbledore planned to kidnap him, the Prime Minister, just because he wanted to ruin Harry's sister's life. He would not condone such action, and while CyberTech stood, he could stand up against the magical world. He would have to meet the young lady and thank her personally. However, having to watch his back constantly was exhausting, and his thoughts trailed off as the building's alarm system sounded throughout, and he frowned in worry as it was quite the different tone to normal. It signaled that there was a magical threat present and standing. A code read. Mr. Prime Minister, one of his CyberTech guards spoke crisply. He was a huge black guy that he would associate, stereotypically, with basketball, and he had a CyberTech earpiece on. You are to stay within this office. Catherine, you stay too with the Secret Service lads. Aye, Commander, the other CyberTech guard answered in a northern accent. Are you sure, Commander Cars? The Prime Minister asked. He nodded as he headed for the door. Yes, sir. It is our job to secure your safety and life. The security defenses have no doubt been activated. It's just a matter of when the fools come into range of our offensive barriers, and how many we capture. Or don't. Wait, what the hell is going on? One of the Secret Service guys demanded as he pulled out his handgun and held it down but at the ready. I get we're under attack, but by who, and why were we not informed of a threat on the Prime Minister's life? Is it more metahumans, or mutants, or something superpowered, at least? Sorry Jenkins, but that is not my business. It's a need to know. I'm just following orders, he replied. However, I believe that you may need to know. Mr. Avalon pissed off some nutbars and took in his twin sister from them. Now these fucks think that they'll get her back if they kidnap the Prime Minister. They do not realize we have strict guidelines stating that this government does not negotiate with terrorists, especially when they are kidnapping someone to exchange for an innocent civilian. Jenkins nodded. Okay, so a bunch of whack jobs with resources, he agreed. Then I am coming too. Be my guest, he shrugged as he pulled out 2 red plastic handguns and threw one to Jenkins, and he just managed to catch it looking confused. It has 3 settings. Off, nighty night, and I'll fuck you in hell. Jenkins gulped as he looked at the switch on the CyberTech branded weapon in awe. He knew CyberTech to be one of the most advanced tech companies on the planet, but he wasn't aware they made weapons, let alone what looked like an energy gun. The Secret Service was really lacking intel there, and funding. Maybe he could get some extra funding for some of these guns. Cars said no more as he exited the room, and Jenkins put away his regular firearm. What setting? He asked as he followed out, gesturing to his partners to stay before closing the door after them. Your decision, he replied as they moved down the corridor. Just a word of warning, although we may not have to engage the enemy, they are to be considered highly dangerous, and if one points anything at you, take them down, especially if it's a wooden stick. Jenkins snorted a small laugh until Cars looked at him with cold seriousness. You're not joking, are you? What kind of damage can they do with a stick if they're not metahumans or mutants? Turn you into a bug, hex you, curse you, or simply kill you, he replied. Fairies, vampires, werewolves, they all exist, he answered to Jenkins's shock. The things that go bump in the night. Welcome to Oz, Toto, he said, smirking while Jenkins looked like he wished he called in sick that day. We're going to be fighting wizards and witches, most of which have been brainwashed into following some crazy old man into battle against a seriously evil wizard, but this old man won't leave us alone because we're doing a better job of fighting than them. He was responsible for Mr. Avalon's parents throwing him out and dumping him with his racist aunt and uncle. Took him away from his twin sister, a girl responsible for the evil wizard's first downfall at just 15 months. Now the evil wizard's back, the old man just won't leave her alone, as she has chosen her brother over her parents, and now the light and dark attack us because they are assholes. Then we must begin a military strike against them, Jenkins interrupted. Negative, he disagreed. Such an act as of yet will reveal all of them to the world. We cannot have all of the religious nutjobs hunting them and committing acts of murder. It's bad enough with the secret anti-mutant activists and attacks. It would be fruitless, as I have little doubt that they would start murdering each other too, as they have no way to be certain. The human species is after all inherently stupid. Try to understand rather than judge, he continued. Let it take its time. There are wizards and witches that live with us and want to just be a normal part of our community. They're just normal people with a gift, like mutants. I do not know the how or why, but I look forward to discovering it. But for now, let's watch, as I believe the battle is about to begin, he added, gesturing the window where they could see some shadowy figures out in the late evening early night. Elsewhere, Dumbledore had not been too surprised that he and his order could not get into the Prime Minister's home by operation, but he was surprised when they neared the perimeter an alarm system started blaring, and that put them all on edge as they recalled the attack on CyberTech. However, as they got closer and onto the main street, surprisingly void of guards, they got more brazen in their victory, and some like Ronald Weasley was strutting. Though, everyone stopped in surprise as some kind of metallic thing silently swished, seemingly from the sky, down before them. It was shaped like a fat curved angled T, the pointed end being the obvious front, the top and back sides red while the lower half a creamy white. It wasn't too large, only about the size of a wheel on one of the cars they passed earlier. However, it was a bit smaller than those they saw in the CyberTech building and didn't seem to fly with propellers like those ones. It was unnerving as it just hovered before them, making a soft humming sound reminiscent of the previous machines that attacked them at CyberTech. The machine's paint seemed to absorb the light, and several quicker-witted members realized that the logo upon it, comprising a black C with a black T stylized in cogs within it, meant serious trouble, and withdrew their wands. Albus, it's just like those other things from CyberTech, said James worriedly. How does it fly? He asked, confused as he couldn't see any means for it to fly. Is it magic? However, Albus hadn't the chance to comment when the thing turned to James. Negative. I am a defense drone. Unit 042. I am the next generation of defensive drone, as I am capable of moving independently of the Seraph network. I have been programmed to answer 3 questions before relaying a message. You have 2 questions remaining. What are the Prime Minister's defenses like? Dumbledore asked smugly. If the boy was going to play games on his head, be it. The thing turned to him. To get through the Downing Street defenses you will need a miracle. I hope you have brought a god with you. I didn't bring a god, one of the Order minions whispered to his fellow. Did you bring a god? Idiot. His friend replied, rolling his eyes. That thing was taking the piss. Hey, that isn't what the professor asked. Growled Ron angrily as he glared at the two, taking it seriously. Why did you say that when he asked you something else? He demanded before anyone could stop him wasting the last question. It is all about your wording, Ronald Weasley, it said, startling them that it knew his name. The question was, it began nonchalant before shocking them all as it replayed Dumbledore's voice speaking his question. What are the Prime Minister's defenses like? It mimicked. I told you in a more human sort of way to scare you into leaving, but it has not worked, therefore I am to give you one last warning. Leave or you shall lose this battle today, and we shall use deadly force as and when necessary. With those parting words it zipped up with speed into the darkness before they could do anything to stop it. Albus, Lily said shakily. That thing is a weapon just like those others, and it said it is number 42, which logic dictates it probably has 41 or more brothers and sisters around here. Maybe we should just leave. Nonsense, he declared stubbornly. I shall not let your idiot of a son best me. For such an idiot he's doing a pretty good job of kicking our asses, muttered Alistair Moody in annoyance as something was interfering with his magical eye. Plus, we've lost members to him, the Weasley girl and girl who lived being 2, along with Granger and Lovegood. Also, Bill and Charlie Weasley appear to be AWOL, and what about our prisoners? You do realize Avalon will come for them using force. You heard that thing. If we continue, if they don't arrest us and throw us in a cell, we know they can keep us from escaping from, they'll end up killing us. This is for the greater good. We must secure Amanda is returned to our possession. She is ours and will defeat Voldemort someday. You know what, fuck all of you, I am going home, Moody said, shaking his head. You should all quit while you're either alive or not sitting in a CyberTech cell awaiting your trial for being terrorists or master whackbags or whatever they decide to charge you with, because the list of crimes is growing. If you hadn't noticed, they can now stop us from operating. How long until they can suppress our powers or whatever else? But Alistair, you joined the Order because even under the threat of Death Eaters the Ministry wouldn't take you back. You said retirement bores you, the old man said in a panic. Yeah, it does. But this is all a bunch of bull, he retorted. I realized the moment we attacked CyberTech that it was not only fruitless but pointless. Amanda is safe and happy with her brother, why the fuck can't you just stay out of her business? She is the only one who can. Yeah, we've heard this shit before, he interrupted, rolling his eyes. But what good is that if she has nothing to fight for? She'll just end up saying fuck it, I'm tired, and let herself die. Just fuck off away from me. Revealing the magical world looks better and better with every passing day, he continued as he turned and started walking away. Maybe CyberTech needs an ex or a consultant, after all they'll probably pay attention to what I have to say. Some of their security seemed like they might have been ex-military. Dumbledore just frowned as Moody disappeared from sight. Let's just continue with the mission, he said, and the rest nodded except a young woman with blue hair as she ran off after Moody, as she knew if he was going she would be in trouble if she stayed. But Dumbledore paid the traitors no heed as he led his order a little ways closer to number 10 when the ground beneath his feet was torn to pieces, and he barely managed to protect himself by creating an earth wall. However, shrapnel skimmed Dumbledore's head, causing blood to pour as he looked around in horror at the sound of explosions. He could see multiple flying things shooting long yellow beams that cut through the ground and anything else in their way, and he was almost sick as he saw several of his unlucky members dead, in pieces or burnt with terror written on their dead expressions. Dumbledore looked around at other members of his order to see the panic and fear as they barely managed to hold off the machine's attacks when the beams ceased and they started firing multiple red blasts in tandem, and Albus had to watch as members of his order were cut down in streams of blood as these things zipped by overhead. It was horrific, and he wanted to puke as his shields were barely holding as the machine switched from red blasts to yellow beams and back again. It hit with force when several yellow beams smashed into his shield, blowing the old man off his feet and back several yards. Dumbledore knew that if anyone survived this, his order of just about 100 would be significantly diminished in size. He landed with a painful crash and the world around him seemed to ring and move in slow motion as he watched the smoke and lights from his position as blood leaked into his eye. He mildly realized that he and his order had never been prepared for war. They were a pushover to the Muggles, and had now been truly trounced, and if he survived, he knew he would be imprisoned. He may not even get a trial. It was horrific. He had never been in such a one-sided battle before, and never thought he would be in one where he could not be the victor. How was it that one pathetic little boy could grow up to be so powerful? To take everything away from him? How could I have lost everything? He demanded in a cry to the sky as he watched the machines as they started shining down searchlights upon them, demanding their immediate surrender. Dumbledore could see a few survivors from the corner of his eye throwing their wands away and obeying to drop to their knees and place their hands on their heads. "How dare you take everything from me?" he roared as he grabbed his charred wand and stood, but started as he saw a man with graying brown hair in a black suit glaring at him with cold blue eyes as he pointed a weapon at him, and the last thing Albus saw was a green light. Albus felt groggy as he returned to the waken world and shook sleep from his eyes as his memories flooded through his mind like a terrifying daydream, and he was quick to sit up in his bed gasping for breath. He looked around in panic as he searched for his glasses. He found them on a small table beside his single bed. It was the only thing in the room beside the bed, he realized as he placed on his specs and looked around the small room. The walls were matte white and dim, but he realized that was probably because the lights weren't switched on full. But he was certain there was no door. The bed was made, and he was lying on top of it wearing a bright red jumpsuit with his name on a sewn-on tag on his right chest along with a long number. He sat up quickly and looked around only to find a pair of slip-on flat shoes with some weird tags that seemed to stick together to hold them on better. Dumbledore was shocked as he let himself fall back onto the bed. His friends and allies, many of them had recently died. For nothing it seemed, as he was now a prisoner. He stood up after a moment and tried to apparate from his tiny cell. He was beyond surprised that he reappeared in his office back at Hogwarts. Being the headmaster had its perks. It was a relief to see his familiar Fawkes again, and the bird squawked in happiness as he gave it a pet, but didn't let the thought of his freedom linger too much as he tiredly sat at his desk. "Fawkes, my old friend, what am I to do?" he asked his familiar tiredly. "I may have been strong enough to escape, but what if they've captured all of the others?" "Albus, are you here?" demanded a sneering voice in panic as his door was torn open, and in charged a greasy-haired and hook-nosed man in dark flowing robes, but he paused on seeing him. "What are you wearing?" he asked in distaste. "I know you enjoy bright colors, but that is going too far. And what has happened to your head and face?" Albus was startled but looked in the little tabletop mirror on his desk to find that he had some muggle plasters on his cheeks, along with a few scratches, and his head was wrapped in bandages. "Never mind that, Severus," the old man replied quickly. "The plan to abduct the Prime Minister did not go as planned, and many members of the Order lost their lives, but perhaps we can salvage this and have our captured members returned to us." Snape sighed while rolling his eyes. "And how, may I ask, do you plan on this?" "We must retrieve our traitorous prisoners from number 12 Grimmauld Place," he replied indignantly. "And how do you expect me to bring them all?" he asked in annoyance. "You'll have to come and help, as I can't bring them all by myself." Albus frowned in annoyance before nodding. "Yes indeed," he agreed with a nod. "But I have no one else, except maybe another member of staff here at Hogwarts." Yes, I'm sure Phileas will be fine with doing me this one simple favor. If you would be so kind as to fetch him, as I need to give him the secret so he can get in. I'll erase him from the Fidelius like I have the others after he has completed this task." Snape sighed in annoyance before nodding with a sneer. "Very well, Headmaster," he reluctantly agreed before heading off out of the door. "Damn, this isn't going to be easy," Albus commented to himself as he picked up a quill and fiddled with it in thought. "They've already made it clear they do not submit to terrorism. So how can I get any control over the filthy muggles and traitors? Would Avalon dare try to take Hogwarts away from me like he's taken everything else? No, he wouldn't dare. He doesn't have that kind of bravado. He would then be declaring war on the Ministry of Magic, and they have hundreds more than I had. Yes, those machines wouldn't stand a chance." Dumbledore was thinking over many things, and time seemed to pass by fast as he said to enter as he heard a light knock, and both Severus and the tiny Professor Flitwick entered his office. The tiny man was about to speak, most likely to comment on his new attire, but he put his hand up to stop him. "That is a story I may never wish to speak of," he said solemnly. "However, I have a favor I need to ask of you." "Of course, Albus, whatever you need," he squeaked out his reply. "Severus said he needs help collecting some traitors from Order HQ?" Albus nodded tiredly. "Yes, I'm afraid so." "Is it possible for you to help bring them to me, as we may need to set them free for the release of captured Order members?" "I see," he nodded, confused. "I suppose I can help, as long as it's a good cause." "Thank you," he answered with a tight smile. "The headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix is located at number 12 Grimmauld Place." And with those simple words Albus dropped to his butt on the floor as the world around him faded away in sparkling colors, along with both Phileas and Severus, leaving him in a bright matte white, empty room with just a huge mirror on one side. Dumbledore just stared at his bruised reflection in horror and confusion before the mirror suddenly turned into a window somehow to show a room behind with several people in. He recognized the Prime Minister watching with a few of his security personnel and some men dressed in what he knew the Muggle military wore. He gulped as they were wearing signa of higher ranks. Ginny Weasley was there with some kind of green panel in her hands, doing something with it while smiling, and next to her was Amanda Potter with a huge grin on her face mocking him. Also, Hermione Granger stood next to a smirking blonde woman, both of them wearing long white lab coats over their normal clothes, and the blonde smile looked even more mocking as it widened. Also, he took a note of Luna Lovegood watching him smiling. She was in an electronic Muggle wheelchair in front of Ginny as the red-haired girl was leaning on the back as she used her panel. However, the man to take most of his attention was standing next to a young woman with short blonde hair and blue eyes, was none other than Harry Avalon, smirking at him. "I told you. You can't beat me, Albus Dumbledore." Harry suddenly spoke, his voice seemingly coming from all around him. "You and your people do not rule the world or dictate its destiny. You're going to jail for a very long time, old man." "Wait," Dumbledore ordered as he pulled himself to his feet and glared at Harry angrily. "You can't do this. We don't recognize your laws. We're practically an independent nation. Within our borders we shall not accept that," the Prime Minister suddenly interrupted. "And if we did, you're within our lands now, which means you abide by our laws whether you like them or not. You set all of this up. Why? He demanded, panicked as he realized he couldn't apparate before gasping. To get into Grimmauld Place, he answered himself in horror. Harry grinned. Cool, huh? You are so predictable. Though, you have been out for 2 days. We've just sent soldiers to free your captives, and I'm sure all of them will enjoy seeing you in jail. You can't do this, he spoke quietly in panic, almost begging. I have to assist the girl who lived in stopping Voldemort. We shall deal with Voldemort, Mr. Dumbledore, said the Prime Minister. He and his terrorist organization are now top priority within the UK, but I understand that there are fractions all over the world, one of the largest being in the US. Rest assured, Mr. Dumbledore, that I have a private meeting with the President tomorrow and shall bring him up to speed so we can make sure he and his government are well prepared, and that the Avengers are informed of Death Eater activity within the US. You can't do this, he answered in quiet defeat. We already have, said Amanda, suddenly moving closer to the window and now glaring. You stole my life, my freedom, and my choice, and now we'll take everything from you, you racist piece of shit. By the way, if you see Dad in jail, tell him I want nothing to do with him or Mum ever again. Why would he throw my brother out on your say-so? If I ever have children, I would die and kill for them unconditionally, because that is what a parent is supposed to do. Parents aren't supposed to throw out a child because some filthy old man tells them to. Maybe we'll get lucky, muttered the blonde woman, suddenly smirking. He might get a slightly disturbed telepath for a roommate in the near future who will share all of his sicko thoughts. Welcome to the crater, Mr. Dumbledore. A man in his 50s with brown hair flecked with grey said as he stepped forward with a polite smile. The United Kingdom's first and only supervillain prison. I believe you have Mr. Avalon to thank for your comfort. Dumbledore stared in horror as he realized this prison was designed specifically with magic in mind. Back at Grimmauld Place, Sirius sighed as he and Remus reclaimed their places on the floor with the other captives, quite glad they had been locked in the kitchen, as they had been left for just over 2 days now and couldn't break the door down. They knew both Nymphadora Tonks and Alistair Moody were now on their side, but neither of them had been capable of breaking Dumbledore's charms, and they hadn't heard from the two in several hours, but they were apparently coming up with a plan to get them out. Boom. They all jumped and moved from the door as it seemed to explode in a cloud of dust, and when it cleared, there they stood at the open portal. There were several people wearing black uniforms with body armor and CyberTech logos, with several more wearing Muggle military uniforms, all of which were carrying large assault rifles except 2 in black carried wands, one a blue-haired young woman, and the other the scarred old ex-Auror, though they were also wearing Muggle uniforms with that CT logo. The house is secure, sir. A young woman arrived on the scene with 2 men in Muggle uniforms, one of the men carrying a cage. The cage had a glow and control panel on the base with keypad. The cage contained a little wrinkled creature that had been shoved in it with bat-like ears, and a long nose with huge black eyes, wearing a tea towel for clothing, and it was squirming and yelling about Muggle filth along with something, which Sirius knew was his mother's portrait from the hall. The creature in the cage was trying to disapparate, but with every attempt it flickered in white mist and didn't go anywhere as it cried and screamed for freedom from the filthy Muggles, mudbloods, and blood traitors. We found this thing lurking around upstairs, she continued, ignoring the creature and portrait. The cage was hastily put together by Miss Klein when we were warned of this nutter. It tried to attack us, so we subdued it immediately. I believe it may need a psychiatric evaluation. It doesn't seem to be all right in the head, and appears to have suffered a lifetime's worth of abuse. Moody nodded. Very well, he said before turning a huge grin to Sirius and Co. You guys coming, or do you like being stuck in here? Shit, thanks, Sirius said as he and the others climbed up to their feet. By the way, what happened to Luna? Is she okay? For the most part, yes, he agreed. She will be undergoing treatment for a while. We had to go to CyberTech to help get you out. Avalon tricked Dumbledore into revealing the Order's HQ. I was there watching on monitors with the team, and I was almost convinced the setup was real. Sir, we've found a few magical items. A man came in wearing huge bulky goggles over his eyes and CyberTech uniform as he held up a small metal box. A silver locket with a snake on it seems to be highly dangerous, and 2 small golden balls with wings that seem to be enchanted but not very dangerous, but they did attack us. Kind of. Sirius laughed. I don't have a clue about the locket, but the snitches I played with years ago for a prank on an old mate of mine. I see, The soldier nodded. However, what are we to do about that? Woman? Just leave it for now, you guys have work to do. All she can do is make a noise, Moody replied. Search every inch of this place. See if you can find out if the books on dark magic are still within the property or recoverable. It is better to know one's enemy, and the Blacks had some of the rarest books on the subject. I think we can help with that, Fred Weasley piped in smugly. Mum was the one getting rid of it all, and we know her well enough to help find them. The man nodded as he handed the lead box off to Tonks before following after the Weasley twins with several other soldiers. So, what happened to the order? Asked Remus nervously. Tonks and I left after we were confronted by what Avalon called a defense drone, Moody replied sadly. We didn't want anything more to do with the fool after seeing number 42, and we can assure you we are thankful we didn't stay. It was a massacre, he muttered, shaking his head. Those that aren't dead are now locked in cells. Molly, Ron? Arthur suddenly asked in a panic. They weren't nearly as worried when Dumbledore attacked you, Tonks said tiredly. But both of them barely made it alive. Your wife, I understand, still doesn't realize how much trouble she is actually in. She's under the delusion that Dumbledore will rescue her and won't listen when we tell her he has also been arrested. I see, Arthur replied sadly. I don't understand how they can betray family for Albus. Just because he says something is right does not mean it is. How can they be so blind? I had always prided myself on us Weasleys being so-called blood traitors, and now I understand that one of my sons is a ministry lapdog, another is a muggle hater, while my wife worships the ground the old man walks on. Sirius placed his hand on the older man's shoulder. Sometimes these things just happen. Look at me. My family has been a bunch of evil jerks for generations, and now I stand against the magical world because it is the right thing to do to bring about the end of all this pointless fighting, as I've now seen the stupidity and ignorance of the world I grew up in. Albus Dumbledore had spent 3 weeks in jail so far and knew if it wasn't for the other locked-up members of the Order of the Phoenix he didn't know if he could cope. Though, he must admit that Ronald Weasley's ranting and raving had been getting on his nerves. However, that wasn't too troubling. It was the other inmates that were getting transferred in that were worrying. They were to lighten the load from other supervillain prisons. Though, he still wasn't quite sure what they meant by that, except that they all wore different colors, either red, him and his group, blue and green, and some were so intimidating that he didn't want to ask. Though, he was now almost certain that red meant magic, as a few Death Eaters had recently been incarcerated with them. Though, they kept away from the other prisoners, especially Dumbledore's group. Though, the old man was certain they were mocking them behind their backs. Who the fuck are you calling inferior? You fuck. A slender pale young man with fiery eyes, grey hair, and oddly elongated ears demanded of the Death Eater group, as the prison settled down for lunch in the huge multi-layered mess hall, though only the bottom floor was used as there weren't nearly enough prisoners to need to use the other 2 layers yet. Albus had looked from where he sat at his table looking nervous and could see the guy was in green. However, what startled Dumbledore and the Death Eaters was he was on the other side of the dining hall, and suddenly moved with unreal speed, clearing several tables as he jumped. The green grabbed one Death Eater by the throat and Albus noticed he was wearing the same cuffs around his wrists and ankles and neck, just like Albus and everyone else. They were told that the cuffs, though thin and extraordinarily light, would induce pain on anyone causing problems with their powers. They were also supposedly shielded against tampering, even by magic. See these ears? The green demanded, and the Death Eater nodded in fright. They aren't just for looking pretty, so I suggest you keep your fucking traps shut, you fucking piss ants. It's already common knowledge that whatever you fucking Reds are, you can't or can barely use your powers in here, but most of us can. Ah, crap. He suddenly cried out, letting the Death Eater drop to the ground and spinning round to see 3 guards. Get back to your food. One guard commanded while looking disinterested. The green just shrugged with one more glare at the Death Eater before stalking back to his friends while they laughed it off. Albus turned from the scene while pale-cheeked. I'm not sure what's worse, here or Azkaban, he spoke softly as before. He thought they were lucky, but now he grimaced as he looked at one of his own cuffs. To be continued. Yet another chapter read, and up. I hope you enjoyed it enough to subscribe, and if you feel up to it, leave a like, or even comment if you so desire. Anyway, you can also follow me on Twitter at Outlaw Realms.